Thank you. I am extremely grateful for Khenpo's teaching. I believe that during the process of listening to Khenpo's teaching, many friends have already developed questions or are facing specific challenges for which they are seeking clear explanations. Now, let's hand over the floor to the students. Does anyone want to ask Khenpo a question? This is a rare opportunity.
I would like to thank you very much indeed. A good friend of mine recommended me to listen to your teaching. Thanks for giving me such an opportunity. My family, including my wife, have also come here to listen to the Master's lecture. It is very touching. Actually, I usually do quite a bit of scientific research as well. There is a common saying, or rather there is a specific phrase that I only half understand. I myself only half understand it, I feel. Let me read it out loud. It goes, everything is number, the number of mathematics, all numbers are philosophy. This short part I can easily understand, because in our modern scientific research work, it is quite often when we face all kinds of phenomena, there are always mathematical laws within them, and mathematics is also related to philosophy. But later on, it gradually becomes confused. All philosophies lead to religion. Religion as in faith or spirituality. And then all religions lead to the mind. Gradually, perhaps Professor Huang can comprehend this, but I myself have not yet begun to grasp this level of understanding. As for the last one or two lines, I still want to understand them. Perhaps in the future, if I can find the time, I will need to deeply and thoroughly meditate upon and study them. All minds are empty, and all emptiness is true enlightenment. I wonder how the Master might choose to enlighten me further. Thank you very much.
All minds are completely empty, and all emptiness is enlightenment. This is very good. That is exactly how it is. Many people may only like to focus on their own specific field of expertise. They are often quite unwilling to step outside the boundaries of their own discipline. For example, if you spend your time studying the field of mathematics, you might be very willing to focus within the field of mathematics. If you study physics, or for example, Buddhist studies, and someone criticizes that field, I would feel very unhappy. Similarly, if someone criticizes mathematics, you might feel very unhappy as well. We all have this kind of tendency. But actually, my view is that we should step out of our own field and enter someone else's world. Maybe when I first enter someone else's world, it feels unfamiliar at the beginning, but as long as I have the energy and courage, I can also fully immerse myself in their way of life. For example, when you visit Australia, at first you might not be used to the food there, but after staying there for a while, you should be able to adapt. Back in 1991, when I originally first came to Shanghai, I wasn't used to a lot of the food here in Shanghai. Don't you guys add a lot of sugar to your dishes here? In Sichuan, we absolutely never add sugar to our cooking. If there was even a little bit of sugar found in the food, our parents would get really worried about the taste. They'd say, how can you mix chili, salt and sugar together? You'll get an upset stomach. They'd say all sorts of things about how bad it was. But after a while, you'll get used to it. It's the same as you mentioned, whether it's math, philosophy, or religion, the principle of when all minds are empty, all emptiness leads to enlightenment. I've memorized it now, and it's not bad. This kind of principle, first of all, I think in this era of data, especially the era of big data, is something that is very important for us to understand as we move forward into the future. A lot of people really ought to learn more about it. If you don't learn, it's very likely indeed you'll be left behind by the times. So learning in this area is absolutely essential for everyone. Secondly, just like we discussed earlier, whether it's from the field of science, in Buddhism or religion, the fundamental nature of all existing phenomena can be said to be the same. But the key is which dimension you use to understand its essence. If you approach its nature from the scientific perspective and ultimately attaining full enlightenment, that's also a wonderful thing. Of course, this may be slightly different from spiritual realization through practice. So I think the verse you just recited is quite good. It was very well done.
Thank you, teacher, for your guidance. There is one nagging question that has troubled me for a long time. Every year, or every academic year, we have a few students, for example, out of the 60 students we admit, there are about 3 to 5 students who, due to academic, family, or relationship issues, they often become very depressed and unfortunately end up losing themselves. It is quite normal for 3 or even 5 students to be unable to graduate. So I was really wondering if you could possibly give us some valuable guidance, especially for students who find themselves in such difficult situations. What methods can help guide them toward a more positive mindset? Do you have any methods, or could you recommend 1 or 2 books? Or perhaps you could share some of your valuable insights for this. Thank you very much.
I think in your specific case, having only a few students unable to graduate is actually a positive outcome. In the place where I am right now, I started a local secondary school. The school has about 6 separate classes each year, with around 50 students in each class. So what usually happens to these students once they graduate? Some classes have 36 graduates, some have 40. Roughly a dozen or so students are already gone. This might be because the education in our area is relatively underdeveloped, but we try many different ways, and sometimes it is really quite difficult and challenging. So I think for teachers who are just starting out in their careers, it is indeed necessary to pay very special attention to these students. You have to frequently talk to them about many different aspects of their lives. Not long ago, I visited a school. They said that out of a group of about 50 students, in the end, maybe 2 or 3 might not be able to graduate. This kind of situation actually happens. But personally, I don't really have any special tricks or secret methods of my own. At our secondary school, when we first started at the very beginning, we enrolled a total of more than 300 students. 3 years ago, our school had over 300 students. This year, when they graduated, there were 248 students. So at that time, I thought all those students in the middle lost their opportunity to study. I said it's a bit of a pity. But I held a special meeting with the teachers to see if there was anything we could do. Of course, some teachers themselves hadn't paid attention for various reasons, but some would try to bring students back from their homes. There are all kinds of situations, but it's really difficult. So I really can't come up with a good solution. The only way might be that students are rather confused during their school years. At the beginning, teachers must explain things to them during the teaching process. At the very least, they really should complete their university education, because if you don't even finish university, I happened to hear in a news report the other day, a few of the teachers mentioned this at the very beginning, there's no point in going to university. They'd say, look at Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, many of them didn't graduate from college. You should just go start your own business. Some teachers use this approach, but it's definitely not very reasonable. Perhaps among teachers, those who teach different subjects may have some differing views. Could there also be some differences among them? So it's vital for every teacher to tell their students, at the very minimum, to finish university. I often tell them, you should finish high school. Regardless, you must finish your studies. Some people say, I want to be a monk. I tell them, that's fine, but finish your studies first. If you still want to be a monk, then you can do it. But sometimes they don't listen. Even though I clearly told them this, they still went ahead and became monks on their own. In the end, they say, you didn't agree that day, but I became a monk anyway. I'm sorry. I think no matter what happens, it's really good to finish your studies. Otherwise, they won't be able to look back on it in their lifetime.
Today, I would like to ask you regarding the meanings of 2 specific words. The first word is doing one's best, and the second is attachment.
I think you probably know as well that children in Han Chinese regions face a lot of pressure growing up. They constantly have to take exams, study, and learn all sorts of things. Friends and parents around us tell us, it's enough if you just do your best in many things. We don't care about the results. Later, after coming into contact with Buddhism, I heard another saying, in life, you need to let go of attachment. So today my question is, how do you distinguish between these 2 things? Am I really doing my best, or am I being attached? A dialectical understanding of these 2 terms. Thank you.
This is very interesting. Doing your best can mean different things in different situations. Some people often say, as long as you put your heart into it, that's enough. I've already tried my best, so there's nothing to regret. But even this fundamental idea of doing your absolute best truly depends on the specific area of life you're applying it to, whether it's academic research, personal relationships, or focusing on your daily studies, for example. The so-called doing my best is actually a rather vague and subjective concept in your daily life. Have you truly and honestly done your best? If you say you've done your best, what specific kind of effort and dedication did you actually put into it? This is a very crucial question. For example, if you say you should do your best in studying, then you do your best to study. But are you really spending every single one of the 24 hours of your day dedicating every possible ounce of effort into studying? Probably not. So doing my best is actually a very conceptual term. If you truly gave it your all, then that's fine. But this idea of doing my best, sometimes when I work with certain leaders on something, they say, I'll do my best. Whenever I hear someone say they'll do their best, I can tell they're probably not that eager to help me get it done. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. Once you hear do my best, it is really hard to tell how much effort they are actually putting in. So I still have some different perspectives when it comes to this idea of doing my best. And then about attachment. After learning the teachings, it doesn't mean you become unattached to everything. Although in Buddhism, at the highest level, there is non-attachment. There is such a state. But before reaching that, everything requires attachment. You have to be attached to the good and also to the bad. If you let go of everything completely, being at ease, letting go, seeing through emptiness, no attachment, that is an exceptionally elevated state of realization. Originally, there is not a single thing, so where can dust alight, as it says in the Platform Sutra? Ultimately, all things are empty at their core, so where could there be dust? At that point, it's fine if you have no attachments. But some might ask, doesn't Buddhism teach you to let go, that phenomena are empty and to be unattached to all things? That's not exactly what is taught. It's like in physics. This phenomenon doesn't just become empty. Looking into the laboratory, eventually you see quanta and molecules, but for a pillar, we don't say, here's a molecule, there's a quantum. We don't talk about it that way. The phenomenon remains as it is, regardless. Only when we truly encounter emptiness, yet this realm of emptiness in our everyday experiences, we don't describe things like that. So, many people may take the non-attachment out of context and apply it to daily life, thinking that Buddhism is about not being attached to anything. But in fact, Buddhism still involves attachment. In Buddhism, saving sentient beings requires attachment, and so does learning. Practice also requires attachment, and so does observing the precepts. There are many forms of attachment in Buddhism. The state of non-attachment is already a very high level. At that point, some things no longer need to be emphasized. This issue may need to be further refined.
All right, thank you very much. I am truly grateful for today's auspicious connection. It is a great opportunity to be here and listen to the Master's teachings. I would like to ask, as you mentioned earlier, one of the requirements you gave us is meditation. So, in our work, if during the day, or especially when we are busy and tired, how can we maintain a meditative state? Or, the meditation you mentioned, I am curious to know what exactly is the recommended specific method or mode of meditation. This is the very first question I would like to ask you today. The second thing I would like to ask is that in my daily work, I frequently come into contact with some children. That is, some students, probably high school students. They are at an age when their outlook on life can be influenced from many directions. As a teacher, when it comes to talking about religion, it is still a sensitive topic. I can't speak too bluntly about certain specific matters, but I really want to plant the seeds of the Dharma in their hearts. This is also the reason why I started my current work. I want to plant the seeds of the Dharma in their hearts and hope that one day these seeds will blossom and bear fruit. So I wonder, how can I skillfully and wisely sow these seeds in their hearts? For example, letting them hear the name of Manjushri Bodhisattva. They can also learn Manjushri Bodhisattva's mantra and so on. I want them to inspire faith. For now, those are my two questions. Thank you, Master.
Regarding the very first question that was asked earlier about the specific practice of meditation we mentioned, Today, since this is a special live lecture session, we aren't specifically required to talk about the details of meditation, but this kind of mental meditation is indeed very important for everyone. Through the consistent practice of meditation, it is actually quite easy to gain some profound personal insight and a much deeper understanding of yourself. Without meditation, it's impossible. That's why meditation masters often say, just as a person drinking water knows for themselves whether it's hot or cold. The states you experience during meditation, only you yourself can truly know them. Others may not necessarily be able to understand. When you meditate, it is truly just like that. Afterward, those who don't meditate feel especially lost. You realize that your previous views of the world, just as we discussed earlier, all those attachments and sufferings. As a matter of fact, when you truly and fully understand the core of it, it turns out to be extraordinarily simple. The state of mind in that moment is both indescribably wonderful and unique. When you finally attain it, you will find it is truly and especially fascinating. Generally, there are many different types of meditation. For example, in some Buddhist meditations, you visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in front of you. You yourself also sit in the Vajra, full lotus posture. You meditate using the 7-point posture of Vairochana. As for some secular forms of meditation, it's just like what is now taught in many companies and universities. You don't think about anything at all. You simply focus your mind entirely on a single thought or on a single point of awareness. Nowadays, Theravada Buddhism also frequently emphasizes awareness, right? The mind just abides in a certain state, and this state, for some, may be a rather clear and luminous state. For others, it may be a relatively happy state, though not truly joyful in the deepest sense, but rather an exceptionally comfortable state. For some, it's a more empty, nothingness state characterized by emptiness. This is called clarity, bliss, and non-conceptuality, clarity, bliss, and non-thought. Even in such a state, it is still a kind of worldly meditation. So, depending on one's own personal situation, one might also engage in some meditation. Nowadays, many universities also have dedicated meditation practices. In fact, in future scientific research work, we are highly likely to see the emergence of meditation clubs. I think this is very necessary, because when conducting scientific research, there is always a certain amount of pressure. This kind of pressure, I've seen in some places, people don't let go of anything at all. The researcher is just there by themselves. You can even choose to contemplate the very topic that you are currently researching. If you keep thinking like this, you might ask how many great scientists made their breakthroughs. They actually discovered them during periods of deep meditation. The mysteries and keys to some of humanity's deepest knowledge were obtained at that time. It was not through any form of conscious intention or purposeful planning, nor was it obtained amidst the noise of chaotic and deeply scattered thoughts. So I truly think that in many academic circles and schools nowadays, there is a very significant and noticeable lack of dedicated spaces or platforms for meditation. If such spaces existed, they would provide immense benefits to the development of our brains and our understanding of our own minds, including breakthroughs in our professional and research fields. There should certainly be some major breakthroughs and gains to be found there. That is the first issue to consider. Now, as for the second issue, in many educational institutions in various parts of the world, the subject of religion is often seen as a highly sensitive topic. Of course, the specific situation varies significantly from one school to another. However, when looking at it from the broad perspective of human history, the foundation of culture is essentially religion. For example, when various people regularly talk about traditional Chinese culture, they specifically mention ethical Confucianism, profound Buddhism, and natural Taoism, among other key philosophies. All of these items carry deep religious significance. When they possess such meaning, even though you are generally prohibited from explicitly promoting religious beliefs in schools, if the context is centered around specialized academic research or objective historical study, then it should be deemed acceptable. A number of schools nowadays are actually learning in a way that is increasingly similar in many respects to Western schools. But when it comes to the topic of religion in the West and Western schools, as is widely recognized by many people today, almost every university basically consists of a variety of different types of specialized colleges. One is the College of Science and Engineering. Everyone is familiar with science and engineering. You all study science and engineering. There is also a College of Liberal Arts, as well as a dedicated College of Medicine. And finally, there is a College of Theology. These major colleges are found in most higher education institutions. In the College of Theology, many religious doctrines are studied. The College of Arts is no different from what we, as art students, experience. So generally, many people in the West believe that when people gather together here, there are the sciences, the humanities, as well as the spiritual and artistic aspects. These four areas, Einstein also mentioned this in the past, are like four branches of a tree, all indispensable. Some people may prefer religion, while others are drawn to the arts. Some prefer the sciences, while others prefer the humanities. These are all indispensable. I've been to many different schools, and most of them are like this. Although our own university may not have a dedicated College of Theology for now, there are some departments of religious studies and some research departments. Perhaps in the future there will be one, because in fact our culture does have a deeply rooted religion. It's just that for a certain period of time, probably in the 1950s and 1960s of the last century, traditional religious beliefs, including Confucian thought, began to be viewed profoundly differently. During this particular era, even the statues of Confucius suffered a significant degree of destruction. Later on, Confucius institutes were established in various places. These are all significant historical changes that occur in many different periods. So, in the near future, if it is not convenient to speak openly about this in schools, or if it's not appropriate, we can just recite the sacred Manjushri heart mantra for everyone, or mention the name of Manjushri Bodhisattva. If the teacher is a bit more open-minded, it shouldn't be an issue. Just because Manjushri Bodhisattva is mentioned in this school, it probably won't result in any major punishment for the teacher. And if there is, it might just be a minor issue. Because in our culture, whether it's Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or Laozi and Confucius, these were true scholars from over 2,500 years ago, and they are prominent historical figures who are widely recognized by individuals across the entire globe. If we use a highly skillful and effective approach to share these principles, it can help plant virtuous seeds in everyone, and every student can benefit. Of course, we shouldn't adopt overly extreme approaches in teaching religious ideas. This can be a highly delicate and sensitive matter in schools. We can observe that this same situation also applies in many Western universities. Although research can be conducted in many Western universities, when we give talks there, some Western universities also say, you absolutely must not conduct religious rituals. Religious rituals are not allowed in our universities. We are focused specifically on academic research. Academic research is entirely acceptable. So I think there is still a difference between research and religious rituals. Therefore, in the future, we can also, within universities, engage in various activities related to the spiritual and creative artistic domains. This is still absolutely essential and necessary. When people reach a certain stage, it is often the case that matters and experiences on the spiritual level become what some people actively seek out even more than before.
Thank you, Teacher Huang. Thank you, Khenpo. I have a question I'd like to ask. In the context of the ear faculty, there is the term entering the stream and losing the destination. I would like to kindly ask the Venerable Khenpo to provide a detailed explanation of the practice of entering the stream and the concepts of losing the destination. It seems that the words themselves are not difficult to understand when you hear them, but it's quite difficult to actually do it. I often find myself getting carried away by sounds, so I would like to ask Khenpo if you could explain this further for us. Thank you.
Based on detailed explanations found in the Abhidharma, the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty each possess their own distinct form and color. There are those who maintain the belief that this form and color are both tangible and visible. Others consider it to be a fundamental and distinct kind of ability. For example, when we listen to different types of sounds, it is through this specific internal ability that we perceive and recognize them. In a similar way, when you see objects in the world, it is also directly due to the natural power of the eye faculty. The concept known as the eye faculty is what we now commonly refer to in modern language as the physical eyes. Among these various faculties, there is a rather special and unique type of form that deserves closer inspection. Generally speaking, when we look at the higher level schools of thought or the ancient spiritual traditions that have been passed down through the ages, such a physical form of this nature cannot be easily recognized. It is only through a certain unique internal ability that we can truly hear and receive this sound. Generally, the realist schools hold this view. But ultimately, this viewpoint may not necessarily be valid. It is simply a part of the doctrine of their particular school that there is such a tangible and visible thing.
I pay my sincere homage to Khenpo Rinpoche and thank you, Teacher Huang, for inviting you to give us such a class. It has also given me many profound insights. What I want to know is, perhaps for those of us engaged in scientific research, we need to conduct research that is heartfelt and warm. And it also requires a rather selfless state of mind. I would like to ask Khenpo Rinpoche, in your process of practicing meditation and pursuing scholarship, have you experienced such a state? Or is it that such states occur frequently as well? Thank you.
All right, well, I am not directly engaged in scientific research, but perhaps what is somewhat similar for me is this. What is fundamentally similar is that I mainly focus on the intricate task of translation work. When I am translating, it can also be deeply considered a unique kind of selflessness. At first, I try my best to grasp the core essence and general meaning of the scripture. Then I find I need to meticulously examine the subtle, nuanced meanings of each individual word. When encountering different interpretations of certain words within it, I have to consult an extensive and diverse collection of scholarly reference materials, and during the meticulous process of comparison, there are also differences between the original translation and the modern translation. As a specific example in the Tibetan tongue, a few years ago, I translated the lives of the 8 great Bodhisattvas. At that time, I went through a large number of Chinese Buddhist Tripitaka texts. Because within the Tripitaka, sometimes you can find the biographies of each Bodhisattva, but when it comes to searching for these, some can be found online. Nowadays, there are online versions of the Tripitaka, so searching is relatively easy. But some are indeed quite hard to find. So I have to go through the entire Tripitaka and various other sources. Sometimes I even feel that with my own way of translating, maybe others have no real idea what I'm doing alone in my room like this. But you could also say it's a remarkable form of selfless dedication. Whether the translation turns out well or not, regardless of whether it's my personal energy or my precious time, I've poured a significant amount of sweat, dedication, and effort into this book. So, throughout the entire process of working on this project, I should say that I'm feeling quite satisfied with the final results of my work. And this kind of spirit can be described as a combination of both rigorous research and true selflessness. I think that, indeed, the pursuit of scientific research really requires this kind of dedicated, selfless spirit. For every scientist, this quality is absolutely indispensable. If you have this spirit within you, you should be able to achieve something truly significant in your field. That's how I see it. Of course, there are many significant differences between my work and your current research. I'm not completely clear about it all. What you call scientific research sounds rather unfamiliar to me, but just now, when I was listening to Professor Wang speak, I actually felt a bit inspired and want to study it well in the future. I just told him, when it's convenient for you, please give us a talk, maybe regarding the Buddhist concept of emptiness and its doctrines. There are actually many points of intersection, which is quite interesting.
Respected Khenpo, hello. My question is, I've heard that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have both compassionate and wrathful aspects, or, in other words, people who are highly accomplished in their practice
they also possess both compassionate and wrathful aspects. So my question is this: when would a Khenpo master use wrathful means? And when would they choose to practice patience?
Buddhas and Bodhisattvas indeed possess both compassionate and wrathful aspects. For example, when Manjushri Bodhisattva appears in his compassionate form, he is depicted holding a sword of wisdom, which is the familiar image of Manjushri Bodhisattva that we often see. He is a symbol of wisdom. Anyone who prays to him receives his divine blessings. However, when Manjushri Bodhisattva manifests himself in a wrathful form, what we often see is the form of Yamantaka, which looks especially terrifying. That is the wrathful aspect. When does he manifest in this way? Generally, it is when there are evil spirits, heretics, or celestial and earthly ghosts and deities who are constantly causing disturbances and severely harming sentient beings, that he takes on a wrathful form to subdue them. Because in our world, some sentient beings can be liberated through peaceful forms, while some sentient beings can only be liberated through wrathful forms. In the past, in Tibetan region, there was a master called Khenpo Bodhisattva at the very beginning. When he came to bring liberation, many spirits and deities would not listen. The first monastery in Tibetan region was Sami Monastery. During the day, people would come to build it, but at night, spirits and non-human beings would come to destroy it. Later, Guru Padmasambhava subdued all the spirits by manifesting a wrathful form, and they all became Dharma protectors in Tibetan Buddhism today. This is a truly authentic and significant part of history. I believe that many practitioners have had very similar experiences. My teacher, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, often emphasized this. He was truly compassionate at heart. He never actually harmed any sentient being. But when necessary, his wrathful manifestation could be truly terrifying to behold. In our classroom, sometimes when a certain behavior was not in accordance with the Dharma, or in certain situations, when he criticized us disciples, he was incredibly strict with us. If the teacher criticized us even once, we would be afraid for a long time, even feel chills down our spines. There was that kind of feeling. As for myself, I probably can't really be considered to have a wrathful aspect. Sometimes I get quite unhappy and am prone to anger. But I'm not particularly prone to losing my temper either. However, sometimes certain things do make me a bit. Of course, my unhappiness has two sides. On one hand, there are indeed times when I see something and feel quite unhappy about it. That is what is called afflictive emotions. I do feel a bit uncomfortable and might criticize others. But this happens rather rarely. There are also times when I see certain people. If I use a very soft and gentle tone, it has no effect at all. But if I pretend to be especially angry, it actually works quite well. So with some people, even during our usual important meetings, when certain specific things simply really can't ever move forward, I'll say a few harsh words, but internally I try my best to maintain mindfulness. But other times, as I keep talking on, at first I'm only just pretending. But by the end, I actually become genuinely angry, because I have really made myself angry. Many people are like this too. At first, they're just joking around. Some people start off joking, but as they keep talking, in the end, they really do get angry. There are people like this too. I might not really count as someone with a wrathful demeanor, but sometimes people need to be calm and quiet, and sometimes they need a certain degree of wrathful power. People still need to possess both kinds of power within them, I would imagine. With this kind of power, it becomes much easier to get things done.
Thank you, Khenpo. Khenpo Sodargye's Fast and Furious lecture has successfully concluded. Let's give Khenpo a warm round of applause as we see him off.